Welcome back to the Elevate Podcast, where we dive into the future of AI, business, and personal growth.
The core that I finally uncovered is the same core in every other study, person I've dealt with, people that I've talked to, and this is it. If you do not feel like you are worth it, you will have problems in every single aspect of your life.
He's a certified expert in NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy, clinical hypnosis, subconscious reprogramming, and AI integration. And he's using it all to help entrepreneurs get out of survival mode and become the architects of their own lives.
He believes true success comes not from hustle alone, but from alignment, where your conscious goals and unconscious programming finally work together.
Aponte, welcome to the podcast. Tell me about who you are, what do you do, and why do you do it?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, that's a loaded question. Who am I? Why do I do what I do? Well, I just think I'm a normal person trying to achieve success in every area of my life, just like most people are. I classify myself as a serial entrepreneur. I've had 14 businesses over the last 27 years. It's kind of been like in my blood. And I'm very passionate about, I used to call it human optimization, but then I realized that, it kind of sounded like I was referring to helping other people, other humans, because I'm not a human. So, but I am also a human. So, optimization specialist for entrepreneurs. I relate most with entrepreneurs. Obviously, I've been one most of my life. And I really love helping people to achieve their best.
And through what means do you do that?
So there's a couple ways, and they've evolved over the years. So early on, because of my own traumas that I experienced in my younger life, achieving success in my young adult life was really hard, because what I didn't realize was I had these old programs and self-sabotaging beliefs that were holding me back. Once I realized that that was what was happening, I dove really deep into understanding the mind and why we do what we do. And so I first started getting into hypnosis, and then NLP. And then those practices took me into meditation. And so I started meditating in 2013. And I literally meditated nearly daily for 10 years straight. So for me, what helped me the most to achieve and to break all of those old ancestral traumas, right? Breaking those chains was diving into myself, decoding the old programs that didn't serve me. And then that's whenever I had the massive leap. And so whenever that happened, I wanted to help others do that. And so those were the first parts of my toolkit that I began to use to help others, namely NLP. So I'm a certified NLP practitioner. And then through meditation, that took me into brainwave entrainment frequencies, and then frequencies took me into isochronic tones and quantum frequencies. And so I realized the impact that they had on us. So then I became a certified sound therapist and ISM mind coach. And so I started using those tools as well to help myself and others to do any number of things. Really, every single aspect of your life can be touched and improved by using those tools. Now, though, with the advent of AI, or I should say now in addition, AI is another tool that I use to help not my personal development, if you will, or my peak performance, but in the business life, being able to automate and delegate or outsource, if you will, to AI, the mundane tasks that I or my team don't want to do, right? The stuff that really takes up your busy time. And so there was a study, I think it was by Capital One or Forbes, I don't really remember, but the study is that on average, entrepreneurs, business owners, 26% of their week, so a little over 3/4 of their week, is taken up by just admin tasks. And so, if you're working a 40-hour week, that's 10 hours a week. And so if you can have AI take care of those tasks, so you don't have to, you just get back 10 hours of your week. And so now that's another tool. So I started, have a digital marketing agency I started 2 years ago. And last year we decided to make the full move over into AI, stepping out of digital marketing. The goal was, in the end of 2023, the goal was, the motto was, we're going to build the business that's going to put our business out of business. And so that's what we did. And so we built and designed AI agents and automations to help small business owners to be able to buy their time. And so for me, that's also part of my toolkit. So, but I believe that there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's work-life harmony. We're all one holistic system, and where a lot of people trip up as they try to excuse me, separate their personal and their professional life. When in reality, what happens in your personal life affects your professional. What happens in your professional affects your personal, because they're closely intertwined in every aspect, even at a subconscious level. If you're not really good in relationships, or you're kind of known for attracting toxic relationships in your personal life, well, you will have those same type of relationships, employees, partners, clients that you attract in your personal and your professional life. And so I believe what I call fully optimized is addressing both of those areas, but really first starting with your personal. What are those programs that are running unknown to you that are causing challenges, procrastination, self-sabotage, dark thinking, right? The bad internal talk. Because if you can uncover and overwrite those, then it not only helps you in your personal life, but it helps you in your professional. And then on the professional side, using AI to automate those things, so that way you can live in your genius and do the things that you really love, or fulfill your passion, whatever that might be.
I love that. It's the old adage, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I like that you start with personal life first, then move in, because you gotta know yourself before you can do it in business.
100%.
Let's go deeper on what were you rewiring in your brain that got you over the edge to where you are the person you are now?
So I was raised in a religious cult from the time I was born till I left when I was 27. And I left with a fervor. I like to curse. I left with this thing of like, fuck you. You don't want anything to do with me now. Because whenever I left, I lost my family, my brothers, cousins, everybody and everything that I knew disowned me and shunned me. And so I was out in this world with no friends. I literally had no friends. I didn't know anybody. And I had no identity, because the way that religious cult was designed was that's who you were. That was your identity. And so I identified as that. And also it's all that I knew. So whenever I came out into this real world, if you will, or this whole new world, I had this whole thought process of that, well, if that's if that's the God that you want me to worship, then I don't believe in God, because that's not the kind of God I want to believe in. So I became an atheist. Um, and I became very hell-bent on becoming a success, because whenever I was an entrepreneur since the age of 16. However, anytime I had these huge goals of just like, to hustle, make money, there was always someone. It was either my family or friends or whatever. Like, well, that's good, But my dad would always say, as long as you have a roof over your head, food on the table, a shirt on your back, you don't need anything more. And so those were, excuse me, the kinds of programs that were baked into me. Not only that, but, as is with many religious structures, and I am a spiritual person, not a religious person, they programmed into me and those in the same, sect, that chasing after money was a sin and being wealthy was a sin. And so that was a program that was really embedded inside of my autonomic nervous system, my subconscious programming, etc. Also, the belief that as a person or as an individual, you really aren't that important unless you solely serve and worship that God, that deity, right? Like, you're not worth really anything unless you are giving your worship. And so what that does at a psychological level is that makes you believe that you're not worthy of anything. It's really not you. You have to give it all to God, right? An external structure that is not internal to you. So then therefore it's not you. It's something else that you have to give all of your quote unquote glory to and your praise to. And so what that does is that makes you feel like, well, I'm not worthy. I'm not worth it. I don't deserve these things. And while you might not believe that consciously, like I didn't, subconsciously, that's what you believe, because that's what you're taught. I mean, we would go to church three days a week, 2 hours a time. So it's really, and then my parents would have Bible study with us, twice a week. And so it's just ingrained, right, into your brain. And prior to the age of 13, everything that you experience becomes in one way or another part of your programming, just due to the way that our brains work. So for me, the biggest things that I had to overcome was, number one, money isn't the root of all evil. It's not a sin to want to be successful and earn a lot of money. Also, I am worth it. I am deserving of success. I am deserving of abundance. I do deserve to be able to channel a lot of success and abundance through me to other people, right? And so those two key things were the biggest ones that held me back. And there were other areas too in my life, my siblings, that unbeknownst to them, because of their own trauma, they reflected that into me, So like one of my older brothers was what we call like a black sheep, and he had a horrible temper, and he was always getting in a fight with my mom. But my mom was a little 5'2" Puerto Rican woman, and you ain't gonna step to her. Like, she'll put you in her place. So there was this constant, like, I remember coming home. My parents never fought in front of us. My parents were actually wonderful people. But my older brother and my mom would fight a lot. So I would have this, I did experience almost trauma, if you will, of living in that kind of household. And so my brother, I always shied away from him. Like, I didn't like him. I didn't really want to spend a lot of time with him. And he knew that, but he wanted, my love. And so he would bribe me with things. He would be like, oh, you want that new toy or that car? I'll get that for you, that kind of a thing. And he would try and buy my affection. Most all of the time, though, he would make these promises and he would never follow through for one reason or another. So what that did to me also another program, and it took years of uncovering this to find out where the roots of these things were. But what happened is that I began to develop a belief that I should never get my hopes up. Anything too good to be true is just that, right? And I shouldn't trust what people say. So now we have this set of beliefs. Money's the root of all evil. I shouldn't trust people. I shouldn't get my hopes up. And I'm unworthy. So are any of those traits important to becoming a successful entrepreneur? Of course, all of them, right? Like you need to want to have to make a lot of money, or else how are you going to build a business, build products and services, pay for employees, etc. How, if you don't feel like you're worthy, then what business do you have? Start trying to help other people anyway, right? Building products and things in those ways. And the same thing with, if it's too good to be true, well, then you get a new client or the prospect of a new prospect is a big one. Oh, that's great. And you're excited, but deep down inside, oh, they're not going to sign. It won't work out. It's too good to be true. So those were the deep core beliefs that were embedded in me, which is why every business that I started would have its success, but it would only ever meet what I didn't coin the term, but it was your financial thermostat, which is embedded in your subconscious. And so for me, also because of all of that conditioning, and because I always remember my dad saying what he said, you just got to be happy with what you have, essentially. My businesses would always get to the point to where they could support me financially, just barely. But every time I would try and go above that, I would have these peaks and then I'd fall. As I say, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of a thing. And that's the roller coaster ride, if you will, of entrepreneurship that I had for 10 businesses, of trying over and over again and trying to start different things. So to wrap this section up and answer your question, those were main beliefs that I had to dive deep into and uncover and rewrite.
So would you say that, like we said earlier, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything? Like your business is basically the shadow cast by your personal beliefs?
Yep.
Wow.
100%. So if you think about it, any business is a direct reflection of the leadership, right? And that goes with everything. That goes into, I was just having a conversation the other day with someone who was an old commander. He's retired now. He was in the Navy. And he said that's the same thing that they would teach them. Is like your ship is going to be a direct reflection of you and your leadership. And so if you're messy, if you're unorganized, your ship's going to be messy and organized. If you're, a hard ass and you're a dictator, then that's the kind of culture you're going to create. If you're, approachable and you teach lessons and you hold people accountable, but, you allow for certain things so that way they can learn, then your culture is going to be that way. And that's the same thing in business. And this is something that most, I would say, slightly less than all employees know. I would say only with 1% of the 1% know that, and they understand that, which is why we see 1% of 1% of businesses being extremely successful. Because what we're not taught is that our direct reality is a reflection of our internal thoughts, beliefs, feelings, because then those turns into actions and reactions. And our reality is based on our perception, right? So I coined this phrase many years ago, he who controls perception controls reality. So if somebody else is controlling your perception, like the news, then you think that that's reality, right? When most news is fake news. And so if your perception is controlled based on what your programs are internally through your neurological systems and your body and energetic systems, well, then you're only going to see what you want to see. So if you see, or if you don't see, you're only going to see what you want to see. And this all just as important as you're not going to see what you don't want to see, because of our reticular activating system. It's called the RAS. We only filter out what's important to us. And for those who maybe have never heard of the RAS or don't understand what it is, it's very simple. I always use the analogy of a car. If you have never bought a car before, and let's say you're my age and you have a midlife crisis, and I wanted to go buy a little yellow sports car because I just think it's so awesome and I never see them anywhere. Well, I go buy a little yellow sports car, and as soon as I drive off the lot, a yellow sports car drives in front of me. And I'm like, what? And then I'm seeing them everywhere, right? Well, what happens is that your mind says this is important to you because you want it and you bought it, but you also need to find it in a parking spot. So now your RAS is wired to see that car, that shape, that color. So now you're going to see that car, that shape, that color anywhere it is. And so you just opened up your RAS. Whereas before, you didn't see it everywhere because it wasn't important, right? And so that's the same thing with how people see witnesses in a crime, that witness a crime. Everybody has a different report because everybody's belief system, their RAS, is wired to see things differently. And so that's why the police and the investigators will have to investigate and question everyone and then kind of deduce from there and try and get to the truth. So as a business owner, if your RAS or if your belief system is only designed to see certain things or only certain things are important, then you're only going to focus on those things. You're only going to take action on those things. And as the saying goes, and as the fact is, where focus goes, where energy flows, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. So if we're putting our focus on, maybe it's just sales, we just got to get sales, get sales, get sales. Well, that's where our energy is going to flow. But if we don't have, because our own life is not very systematized or optimized, well, then all those other things in your business are going to fall apart. If our focus is, well, let's just go to the smaller businesses because, we just want to help them and we don't want to charge a whole lot of money, kind of a thing. Well, that's where your focus is going to go. And all of the other things are going to fall to the wayside. Same thing with relationships. I say that business partnerships and your team, they're relationships. It's you're dating your partnerships. You're dating your CFO, your CTO, your COO. Like, you're all dating. It may not be a romantic relationship, but it is a relationship. And so if you're horrible at relationships, well, guess what? So if the business owner understands that they're the leader and that everybody is going to either fall in line or fall out of line according to their leadership, well, then it becomes obvious of what you have to do. You have to sit down and say, well, I'm struggling. My business isn't here. Why? Well, take a look at yourself. Take a look at your own programs. Take a look at your personal life. Take a look at your own, what you have in your microcosm, so that way you can really see and understand what's happening in your macro, right? And so, yes, to answer your question simply, people don't like the word, but I like to say it anyway. If your business is shit, it's your fault. And once we start to take responsibility for everything that happens in our life, which is hard for a lot of people to do, but it's the most empowering thing that you could ever do. And the reason is because if you take responsibility for it, you're in control. If you don't take responsibility for it, you're releasing your control to someone else or something else. And I prefer to be in control of my life as much as I can, right? I have an adage, control the controllables, let everything else fall into place. So whatever you can control, you can control. Everything else, I let God take care of it, or the universe, whatever. And so I think once you realize that, the way you look at everything starts to change. And if where you're at is painful enough for you, then you'll start to make those changes.
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday about the idea that everyone thinks, or most people think, the environment happens to them, but actually it's the other way around. You happen to the environment, and that's displayed easily just by two people's perceptions of the exact same event. Completely different, same environment, same event, completely different perceptions. And that's the event that happened to this person is completely different than the event that happened to another person. And so you happen to the environment, and what you're saying is take responsibility. And that's, one of the best steps or first steps to impacting your environment.
It is the number one, it is the only thing, the thing that changed my life. It was 2018, it was June 9th, 2018. I was pulling up into a little office that I was renting, no bigger than this one, probably half the size of this one. And I was having a pretty challenging life at that point. I was at another valley in my life. I had previous success of what at that time I would call success. And then because of my programs, my financial thermostat turned on and said, whoa, you're out of your comfort range and you need to self-sabotage and get back into place. And so that's what I did. But then what also happens is you go, we call it the penthouse, the main room, and the basement. So I went from the main room up into the penthouse and I was feeling good. Subconscious turned on, said, whoa, we got to get you back in line. Because remember, anybody listening here, the subconscious does not know what we determine to be right from wrong. It does not know right from wrong. All it knows is what it's programmed. And so my program was, making $30,000, $40,000 a year. That's where I should be. So whenever I was doing a lot better than that, sabotage turned on and it started to take me back down and I plummeted, lost almost anything, 70% of my clients. And so what happened was we decided to move from Florida to Colorado, but that's not what happened. What happened is that all of my clients there, even though I could service them remotely, they didn't want to continue on because they were like, if you're not going to be local, then we don't want to work with you. And that was a fear of mine. That was a fear of mine whenever my wife and I decided to start talking or talking about moving. I was like, yeah, but I don't know. What if my clients still don't want to work with me? That was a verbal fear of mine, and it ended up happening. And so whenever I moved, I lost a lot of my clientele, and I essentially, when we moved here to Colorado in 2016, I had to start rebuilding everything. So that was really hard. Obviously, financially, on the marriage. Anybody who's had financial troubles in marriage know that is the number one cause for divorce. And so it was a mental explosion for me too, because I was like, well, here I am. Again, I worked so hard to get to where I was. And now I'm here, barely making $30,000 a year. And this is like absolute shit. And so I was blaming everybody. I was blaming my clients because they left me, because I was like, there's nothing that I do for you that can't be done, across the world. So I was blaming my clients. I was blaming my wife because at this point, after we had moved here, it had been a year and a half and I was trying really hard to build my business back up, local clientele. But as you know, it takes time. And I was having minimal success at it. So I was blaming my wife because she was telling me, and what made it worse, like her mom, my mother-in-law, was also being like, go get a job, like that kind of a thing. People were whispering behind my back. And I was just extremely upset. But on June 9th, in 2018, something broke inside of me. Because I realized as I pulled into the parking lot of the place that I was renting for work, I looked at the clock on my phone and I saw the date, and it immediately reminded me. 9 years earlier, I made a promise to myself that in 10 years I would build $1 million company. And so here I was 9 years into this promise and making whatever, $28,000, $32,000 a year at that time. I had plummeted. So instead of taking 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, I took 5 steps forward, 6 steps back. And I broke. I literally broke. I started crying in my car. I was so upset. I was so mad. It made me even more upset. Everybody else and everything else. Well, why this? Why all this? Why these people don't want to do that? Why that? My fucking wife and blah, blah, blah. And I was like yelling in the car. And I was like pounding on the steering wheel. And I was just so angry. I had a mental breakdown. And so then I started sobbing and crying. And because I felt like the biggest failure ever.
Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of this incredible conversation with Matt Aponte. Part 2 drops in just 2 days. We're diving even deeper into practical tools, mindset mastery, and real-world transformation. You do not want to miss it.